we saved some kolaches, so they will be at the back, Barb, when you're ready to pick those up. So at the end of the program, you can pick those up.
I'll get them for her.
Yeah, and Steve will probably.
You'll eat them for her.
You'll never see them, Barb. Welcome to the 12th and final program in the Towns of the County series, co-sponsored by the Huresca Memorial Library and the Butler County Historical Society. Every town in Butler County has a wealth of history, and throughout 2023, we have celebrated the 12 incorporated towns of Butler County. It is because of all the towns that our county seat of David City has thrived. It is a testament to the good people of each town that the little towns continue to exist. The presenters of the presentations in this series have been people who live in and are leaders of their towns. They have worked hard to gather photos and historic information to create their programs. They have practiced for hours and hours. Giving a program isn't easy, especially in front of large crowds. So we owe them our respect and gratitude. Please hold your questions for the end of the program and be considerate of the speakers and listeners. Please, at this point in time, stop everything you're doing and mute your cell phones. These are on YouTube eventually, so we don't want any other sounds. And now, let's hear from about the history of Linwood. We're proud to introduce Joel and Rhonda Cerny and their daughter, Kendall Cerny Rakacek.
Yes.
Good job.
She actually made it phonetically. So I appreciated that. Please welcome them.
There's an awful lot of people here tonight. What a great opportunity to present the history of Linwood to such a wonderful group. Thank you for joining us as we bring to you fond memories of our community. Thank you to everyone that has made this series of presentations possible. You've experienced how fond many people are of the towns in Butler County. You've seen the pride of Butler County through the many memories shared that reminded you of your own hometown history. Many of the presenters talked about their families, their childhoods, and the people and events they remember. This also has created an opportunity for many of the Linwood residents to pull together and gather information to share with you tonight. As you settle back in your chairs, we hope you enjoy the memories we have to share from once booming town of Linwood. This map has detailed the layout of the village of Linwood in 1906. Thank you to everyone that has contributed in any way. From pictures and items to display, we're putting Linwood on the map tonight. And a special thank you to the many folks of Linwood area that have helped with the historical information, and to the gals that decorated the Linwood Christmas tree at the library here in David City. It's amazing what you can make happen when you work together. We've come to the very last program of 2023, but I can't go on until I thank Gina Barleen for all she has done to make this possible. Bless her heart, when she sent out a request for a Linwood representative for this event, she heard none. But thankfully, she didn't stop there. She moved forward on her own to be sure that Linwood was included. Well, thankfully, her determination led to a meeting at the Linwood Fire Station in October, and here we are. Thank you, Gina. Although this is the last program, it's about the town of Linwood. And about Linwood, there are many firsts. The first settlement, the first school, the first post office. Gina didn't grow up in or ever live in Linwood. She has no personal memories to share about going to church or school in Linwood. No memories about the businesses or the colorful characters of the town. She does, though, have 90 years of ancestors who lived in Linwood and can be considered pioneers of the area. This was the drive she needed to not let Linwood go unnoticed. In 1873, Bartos and Marie Soder came from Moravia, as did so many of the Czechs in Butler County. They homesteaded near Linwood, but in Bohemia Township in Saunders County. Many of their descendants will still live near the Linwood area and in other places of Butler County. These are Gina's great-great-grandparents. Also, in 1873, František Černý and his wife Frances came from Moravia and settled near Linwood. František and Marie were also Gina's great-great-grandparents. Through these great-grandparents, it brings into shirt-tail relation of Gina to Cheryl O'Brien, Joel and Rhonda Cherney, Kendall Burkacek, Bill and Terry Cromie, and many other people in Butler County. What a small world. In fact, Kendall lives just a mile from the original Frank Cherney homestead. Much is written about František Cherney in the history of the Linwood area. A story was printed in the Banner Press, written by historian Alfred Novacek. His article said that after Frank paid his filing fee for the land he homesteaded, he had $20 left to his name. With that $20, he bought some boards, nails, flour, and salt. They built a rough shack, and off he went to any home he could to try and offer his skills for pay. Frank knew the trades of watchmaking and repair, cigar making, violin repair, carpentry, and he was even willing to pull teeth if that's what it needed. He'd often be gone for weeks at a time, leaving Francis and his children in the rough shack he'd built. They worked hard and persevered. Later in time, it's written that Frank ran a cigar factory, and then later yet ran a watch repair shop in Linwood. Frank's son, Joseph Cherney, would marry Bardo Soder's daughter, Katrina, joining the Soder and Cherney families. These were our great-grandparents. Joseph and Kate lived in Linwood, and Joseph was well known but for earning a living digging wells. But there's also record of him running a cigar-making business in Linwood, possibly one he took over from his father, Frank. There was an article in the newspaper that said Joseph once built a large merry-go-round that could hold 14 children. It was written that Joseph built this for the frontier celebrations, and he charged children 5 cents a ride. Joseph and Kate would have 10 children. This bit of information isn't included to brag about our families, but a rather interesting bit to the fact that many families that homesteaded in the area continue to have family members residing there today and just as proud of Linwood as we are. Now, let's talk about the origin of Linwood. First and foremost, we must remember that long before the settlement of Linwood, the land of Linwood was inhabited by the Pawnee Indians. These Native Americans were peaceful to settlers for the most part, but could be fierce warriors, especially when it came to the Sioux tribe. The Pawnee were a matriarchal society. The women planted squash and maize, and the entire tribe went together on buffalo hunts twice a year. The Pawnee that lived near Linwood were members of the Grand tribe, and they lived in dome-shaped dwellings in a large village by what is now called Linwood from the years of 1777 to 1890. Then they vacated the village, possibly moving to new grounds for better hunting or grazing grounds for their ponies. In the 1820s, the Otto tribe took up residency there. This photo, taken from the Linwood Hill Cemetery, shows the Platte Valley near Linwood. Even back in 1856 and 57, this area of Nebraska was not a desert as the pioneers had believed. The soil was fertile, the water and wildlife were abundant, as were the trees along the water's edge and in the rolling hills near the Platte. James Blair and Solomon Garfield sent for their families and decided to bust sod right there in the valley just south of the Platte River. James and Mary had the first male child born in Butler County. This child, William, referred to as Bird in some records, was born in 1856 in the Linwood area and is buried at the Linwood Dawson Cemetery west of town. With the word about Pikes Peak in the Golden, California, many of the fortune-seeking men let the dream of a town being built for a quicker path to riches. Education in Butler County began. The structure for the first school, built near the present-day Linwood, was 10-foot by 12-foot building made of unhewn logs with a log and sod roof. In today's world, a 10 by 12 room would be the size of a bedroom. This photo shows the school, which at the time of the photo was being used as a cowshed. In 1869, the schoolhouse pictured here was built in Linwood. That school was District 2, and it was quite a lovely building, as we see in these photos. One can almost hear the ringing of the bell to let the children of town know it was time for school. Dave Mott gave the museum a wonderful notebook filled with letters, handwritten with ink lettering, that let the state know that District 2 had been created and the taxable inhabitants could be informed. There were several preserved receipts from businesses for lumber and other goods to build and then stock the school. Crayons were 20 cents a box. There's a letter to note that the employment of Miss Ada Vandercolt being hired for a 3-month schedule, being paid $60 for that time period. Then Mrs. Sarah Johnson was hired for a 3.5-month period, being paid $100. The land for the school to be built on was purchased from William Spring. Okay, just a second. Okay. It would be 1867 when Nebraska became a state, and 1868 when Butler County was officially organized. That's also the year when Omaha ceded the capital of our state to Lincoln, which helps you understand how in these years our entire state was making big decisions and building the place we now call our state and county. 1868 is also when Sarah Johnson would insist that the growing town stop calling itself Skull Creek. She suggested that it be called Linwood, after the many linden trees in the area. Some records also say that the Czechs of the area gave Linwood the name to commemorate the linden trees they loved in their homeland. Although in 1868, the Czech population of Linwood wasn't very large, the citizens being more of the English or German heritage at that time. Sarah's husband, Frederick Johnson, was concerned that the area had no mail service, so he petitioned federal authorities for a mail route between Ashland and Linwood, and for a post office in Linwood. Gilbert Hobart carried the mail between Linwood and Ashland, making the route by horseback, stopping at a German family home halfway overnight, as there were no other settlers in the route. He would eat his meals, feed the horse, and go on to Ashland, get the mail, return, stay over, and bring in the mail the next day. The post office changed hands many times. Mrs. Fred Johnson first, then George Richardson, then George Tyndall, to William Blair, who had that for quite a while, then on to William Corporal, Dr. Drasky, Edward DeLesta, Fred Thomas, Murray Bonzek, and now Dave Mock. The Banner Press front page files from 1993, written by Jim Reisdorf, said that on April 20th of 1868, Fred Johnson was appointed postmaster of the post office named Linwood, the first post office in Butler County. Fred's wife, Sarah, was also named a deputy postmaster and likely did much of the post office work. 2 photos on this slide show different old post office boxes that are now retired behind the current Linwood post office. Dave Mock says the bank that is still standing now also served as a post office at one time. There were actually many buildings in and around Linwood that throughout the town's history were used as post office. The post office moves were made because whoever the postmaster was often chose to run the service from their business or home. 1869 was the year the Dawson family came to the area of Linwood. Rudolphus was the patriarch, and writings say that he took up residency in the first home that was built by James Blair. Rudolphus would eventually build the Dawson Mansion, as it was referred to, on the same site, and his son, then his grandson, then his great-grandson would all run Dawson Ranch, employing many men. The Dawsons herded thousands of cattle for 4 generations, all from the bareback of a horse, according to family lore. The 1870 census showed 38 families living in the Linwood community and 13 more outside of town. The large families amounted to 143 people. Family names included Dawson, Halstead, Bartos, Vadinger, Palmer, Prey, Grunterod, just to name a few. By 1871, several different trains came through Linwood's rail yard. People would stop for a bite to eat at what they called one of the best restaurants in the area of the state. Then they'd stay overnight at possibly the Star Hotel, one of the 3 hotels in Linwood. Harry Danny was the Chicago and Northwestern Railroad agent from 1922 to 1938. Trains brought in new settlers. The railroad was benevolent king, gifting the town with prosperity and employing many men. Carloads of needed items came into the town via the rails, and carloads of grain left on its way to other destinations. And Linwood had the only roundhouse in Butler County. Although it isn't shown in any of these photos, the turntable was originally hand-turned. The roundhouse sat by the engine house, which still stands. Linwood had the largest railroad in Butler County, and people of that era expected Linwood to grow as large as Omaha. Keep in mind that at that time, Omaha was a town of 16,000, a little bigger than Scotts Bluff. Linwood also had what was called a Y, which allowed trains that ended their trip in Linwood to uncouple the cars, back up the engine, then return to their point of origination. The Y was west of town, and the homesteaders kept coming, pitching tents and building soddies out around the surrounding land by Linwood. And now, in the 1870s, more and more of those new settlers of Butler County were Czech. Also in Linwood in 1873, a congregational church was built. Alfred Tkachuk wrote that it was built on a hill, then moved into town. And he said that most people in the area went to church there. Many of the original settlers there came to Linwood were English, with names like McBride and Blair, Dawson or Gardner, and possibly of Protestant affiliation. Here we see a photo of the congregation of the Linwood Congregational Church. These people were in charge of praying for those in Linwood who suffered the blizzards and fires of 1872, and then the practically biblical 1874 grasshopper plague. The insects ate all the crops and eliminated the farmer's harvest for that year. They would not be able to sell grain. There'd be no money to put into savings, no income for clothes or food or seed for the coming year, no grain or hay to feed their animals. This disaster must have buckled the farmers of Linwood, yet they persevered again, determined to strive for success. Peter Kuchera and his family immigrated to the area of Linwood in the 1870s. Here is a photo of the Kuchera homestead southeast of Linwood. Peter Kuchera's son, John Kuchera, and his wife, Mary, would have 17 children, 13 of those being sons. Their first house, pictured here, was 32-foot by 16-foot structure, and they had their first 10 children right in that home. Keep in mind that John and Mary and their 10 kids and Grandma and Grandpa, another relative, and a helper all lived there too. That's 16 people, which surely had to be crowded. Then John built a big frame house where they had 7 more children. Mary had those 17 children over a course of 20 years from 1899 to 1919. There was an article in the World Herald of 1956 that called John Kuchera a champion father. The article said that John and his 13 sons had 26 horses and 6 plows going at the same time, plowing up to 40 acres a day. Over the years, he increased his acres from 160 to 600. One of John's 13 sons was Ernie Kuchera, longtime and well-known band leader, often called the Polka King. Ernie wasn't the only musician in the Kuchera family. This is a photo of the Kuchera Accordion Orchestra. From left to right, you see Emil Malachik, Frank Kuchera, Ed Havorka, Bill Sobolek, Al Grebenik, and Albin Beanie Kuchera. Music must have filled the air in Linwood back in the day, because we have found a lot of information about various talented musicians. William Vrana led the Goldenrod Orchestra. Ernie and Marie Henisch raised their son Steve in Linwood with a great appreciation for the Czech culture and music. While living across the street from the ZCBJ Hall, he fondly remembers summer nights listening to polka music playing into the wee hours of the morning coming through the screen windows. He started drumming at the age of 13. Ernie Kuchera and Milo Polinsky were very important influences to Steve, and it was Polinsky who gave Henisch his first drum lessons at the Bud Comp studio in David City. Another popular polka musician from Linwood was Michael Breshka in the orchestra, of which Steve Henisch was a member from 1975 to 1980. Edward Hobart, his wife Mary Julia Krotzel, and a few others had an orchestra band and played for many club dances. Tkachuk wrote that Old Man Cherney with his sons had a strong orchestra and played for many dances, and that Albert Marsh, built a dance hall in the rear of his store and had many dances there. Old Man Dosakal had a small band, and they were able to play 2 tunes, and the people danced and were glad to have some entertainment. Takacsik also said they also sold whiskey and the government fined them for it. Here are more of the area musicians. I'm just not sure about the photo bomber by the barn. Anton Bartzel was well known for his talents on the tuba, as you may see in this picture from the Fred Benish wedding on September 17, 1955. I'm told it's Al Bonger sporting the underwear on his head, and Bill Sheba is in the back row, but not sure about many of the others. 1877 saw the steady growth of the town of Linwood. Although it is still unincorporated, Fred Johnson, the owner of the mill, donated land east of the original town site, and this is where the new and current town of Linwood would begin. If you recall, I told you that Fred Johnson was the first postmaster. In 1877, he's still the postmaster and also the first official mayor of Linwood. The town of 1877 has many businesses and services. When the Union Pacific Railroad line was constructed through Linwood in 1878, a flood of settlers poured into the valley. Emil Fulda opened the Farmers and Merchants Bank that year. The Fulda Bank empire grew into many banks in many towns such as Schuyler, Clarkson, and Pilger. This photo shows Fulda brothers of the Fulda banking fame. Emil ran the bank called the Farmers and Merchants Bank of Linwood. Takacsik's book noted that Linwood had its own implement business. Linwood also had the home for a candy factory and a lumber yard. According to Takacsik, there was a pool hall, a cement block factory, a Pilsner brewery, and he wrote a cigar factory run by old man Frank Cherney. Our great-grandfather just keeps popping up in this Linwood history. Prior to the railroad lines coming through, it was important for businesses to provide people of the small towns with what they needed. This is why they had such a variety of businesses, from milliners to creameries and confectioners to cigar factories. In 1887, a Methodist church was built in Linwood. It sat across the street east of the ZCBJ Hall on the southwest corner of the block. In 1890, the population of Linwood bloomed to 309 souls. In 1887, towns were popping up like flowers in the springtime. Octavia, Dwight, and Abie bloomed that year. In 1887, the Fremont Elkhorn and Missouri Valley Railroad built a line from Platte River Junction to Linwood. At Linwood, a line went to Hastings through Octavia, David City, Millerton, and Surprise. A line from Linwood toward Superior included Abie, Bruno, Brainard, and Dwight. Imagine the excitement of the people in all these towns seeing the arrival of these trains. The railroad connected people and allowed them to visit relatives or shop in other towns within hours instead of a whole day or more with horse. The train moved at about 25 miles an hour, 5 times the speed of a horse and cart. Also, the construction of this railroad line would have been enormous. In 2 years, 250 miles of roadbed was cleared and leveled, bridges were built, and rail was laid. The engine house built in Linwood was 62 feet long. Many train crew families either lived in Linwood or stayed in its hotels. And Linwood finally became an incorporated town in January 1888, as noted earlier. In 1890, the town of Linwood built a brick school. Only 8 grades were initially taught at the school. In 1898, high school classes began in the fall. 15 freshmen enrolled that year. Here we see a photo of the Linwood High cheerleaders. Recent discussion is that these ladies may have been a football team instead. So I feel everyone can make their own assumptions at this time. Here are some class photos from the brick school in Linwood. Some familiar names you may recall are Eckstein, Makalan, Walla, Molina, Havorka, Bartzel, Brechka, just to name a few. Linwood City Hall was built in the 1900s and included a 2-cell jail with woven metal jail cells. The top floor was used for town hall meetings, parties, and band practice. The city ceased to be used in 1963. In 1992, according to an article in the Schuyler Sun, Linwood residents attempted to restore the Linwood City Hall and have it listed as a Nebraska historical building, but those efforts failed. Irma Hoffman-Pabian and Clara Tahachik-Waha recalled going to the City Hall with their mothers, where Red Cross ladies made bandages for World War I casualties. The building was on the west end of Main Street of the town, but is no longer there. The old bank building is currently being used as City Hall for Linwood. The townspeople had a ZCBJ hall. Many dances and gatherings were held there. ZCBJ was an acronym for Zabini, Chesko, Bratsky, and Dusky. Yeah, sure I messed that up. This translates to the Western Bohemian Fraternal Association. The halls were chapters of the organization that offered its members insurance and other financial services and sponsored social and cultural activities such as wedding receptions, anniversary dinners, plays, and many dances. Current Linwood residents also recall basketball games being played in the hall. The old ZCBJ hall is where New Year's Eve dances were held. Before Carol Gravonic of nearby Abie could drive, he would pester his dad to take him to the dances so he could meet up with Sharon and set up in the balcony for a date. The top right photo here shows the ZCBJ sign still gracing the deteriorating building. Cheryl O'Brien remembers a story about her parents, Ed and Viola, as babies. Their parents would bring them to dances at the hall, and when the babies needed to go to sleep, their parents would lay them down in the coat closet. So essentially, her parents were close from the time that they were babies. Cheryl remembered that the women ran concessions in the basement of the hall, and the kolaches were sold for $0.25 apiece. Later, they moved the concession stand upstairs and used the coat closet to set up for the refreshment sales. Cheryl remembered going to dances with her folks. They'd tell the kids, go outside to play, but stay in front so we can check on you. Cheryl and her cousin would hang out and play on the metal handrail, doing flips all around it for a while. Then they'd start running around the building. Soon they'd be out exploring by the outhouses. Before they knew it, they'd be down the block and on town's main street. But of course, Cheryl blamed her cousin for the trouble they got into. We mustn't forget the Linwood Democrat, a newspaper in Linwood. Everything they write in the 1890s about Linwood describes a booming town with many growing businesses. The view of Linwood at that time is positive and hopeful for continued growth. There was also a short-run newspaper in the town called the Linwood Advertiser. They printed a humorous series of little articles from 1896. Dr. Fitzsimmons of Linwood had had just about enough with an old lady, as the newspaper referred to Antonia Stava. Dear Mrs. Stava had been a midwife in Linwood for many, many years. She'd been the loving hands that delivered many babies in the area and the woman who had always been available to help tend to the sick of the town. But Dr. Fitzsimmons wasn't happy about her taking his business or about her practicing without a medical license, so he reported her, leading to her actual arrest. The town was hopping mad, and I'm sure this led to some threats and sleepless nights for the doctor. Ultimately, the case came to trial and was dismissed, leaving the doctor up to pay court costs. Here we see a picture of Thomas Tkachuk's general store. This store was also called the Brick Store and was just east of where the Linwood Post Office is now. Sharon Kravanik remembers walking into Tkachuk's general store and buying bulk seeds for the garden. She said the store had a certain good aroma, which she can almost smell to this day. The little grocery store by the tavern is where Sharon dreamed about a doll she might get for Christmas. She still has this last fancy doll in a box as a memory. Cheryl O'Brien remembered there was a coffin at the back of Tkachuk's store. Kids would dare each other to come look through the windows at night to see if there was a body in the coffin. Sandy Makalam-Brandel, pictured here, also has fond memories of growing up in Linwood. There were, as far as we can gather from current citizens, 3 hotels in Linwood: the Star Hotel, the Linwood Hotel, and one for the railroad crews. At a meeting of the local folks, there was much discussion about where the hotels were located. I believe there was one hotel for the railroad workers, possibly on the east side of town near the tracks. Another hotel was north of the tracks by Adolf Sedlichky's place. One was also where the Ball Diamond is now, and on the same block as Fred Schromick's blacksmith shop. We only have this photo of the Linwood Hotel. Marilyn Mockelon remembered that Frances Karpachek-Kriege, her grandmother, had worked at the Linwood Hotel. She said it was the one in the same block as the blacksmith shop that belonged to Frank Schromick. In 1971, Alfred Tkachuk wrote a book about the history of Linwood and the Pawnee people. Toward the end of the book, he's looking back through the years and writes about when things began to decline in Linwood. When he writes about this era, you can hear the despair in his written words. He sees that the town's hotels were thriving right up until the arrival of automobiles. Larry Griffith, retired DCHS English teacher, has a connection to Linwood through the Bartos name. His great-grandparents ran the saloon bar in Linwood during the late 1800s, early 1900s. They were Frank and Marie Bartos, the parents of his maternal grandmother. The picture shown here has been in his family for years and also hangs in the Nowhere Special Steakhouse back in the hallway by the restrooms. The photo shows Larry's great-grandparents' family when they ran the saloon. Larry remembered that when he told his grandmother he was coming to David City and Butler County to teach, she spoke of the area as though he was going to live in heaven. Bartos Chesky Hostenek, as you see written on the glass of the windows, is Czech for Bartos Check-In. The building was where Nowhere Special now stands. Tkachuk wrote about other bar owners in Linwood. He said that two different dosicals, a Blatine, a Prey, a Cavan, and a Peltz all had a turn in running bars. He wrote that when Prohibition came, they closed the doors. 16 years of Prohibition and then the repeal. The bars in Linwood have had several new owners since the writing of Alf's book. There was Joe and Milo Stukel, Libby Sorensen, Richard Bartzall, Louis Pellon, Kim Proviance, Dave Modis, Clanton and Joni West, Big Phil and Mike Soder, just to name a few. And currently, Nowhere Special is owned by Nick Cherney. Butler County Press, June 1906, published the Articles of Incorporation for the Linwood Telephone Company, incorporated by Frank and Fred Fadinger, D.G. and W.F. Dawson, Emil Folda, Thomas Duda, M.J. Rezach, Charles Homolka, and A.J. Hayek. There are 3 cemeteries in Linwood. Jeannie Hain from the library has information regarding the order these cemeteries were created. The first cemetery in Linwood was the Dawson Cemetery, officially organized in 1872. Many of the original settlers are buried there. This cemetery is west of Linwood. The Linwood Hills Cemetery was the next to be formally organized. Although burials preceded the signing of the deed in 1880, the earliest burial date was 1872 for Frank Sofel, who had been 26 years of age when he died. The deed for St. Mary's Catholic Cemetery of Linwood was signed in 1917, and that's the oldest date for markers in the cemetery. The St. Mary's Catholic Church of Linwood wasn't built until 1901. So where did the Catholics worship before that? In the 1870s, a group of Catholics gathered together on a hill near what is now called Camp Moses Merrill near Linwood to hold their church service. Our great-great-grandfather, Frank Cherney, who lived in those hills and was a part of that group, built a large wooden cross that was erected on the Philip Mirage farm. The neighbors gathered there to sing hymns and say prayers in Czech. I'm sure the sound of the voices in worship out in that open prairie must have been a beautiful thing to hear. The familiarity of the language, the memory of their homeland, which looks so much like the rolling hills of that area, and their Catholic faith that drew them together, would have been a deep comfort for those of this land. When Frank's cross started to decay, his son Joseph replaced it, and then others did the same over the years. The cross still stands, a memory to the strong faith these immigrants had. Gina drove all around Linwood countryside searching for that cross, but couldn't find it. Then she met Cheryl O'Brien through the Nebraska Bohemians Facebook group. They got together to visit and found out that the cross was actually right by the driveway of her home. She was able to go out to her house and see it herself. There have been articles about the cross written in the Fremont Tribune, the Columbus Telegram, the Lincoln Journal-Star, and the Fraternal Herald of Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Cheryl remembers her grandmother, Agnes Kuchera Havorka, telling stories about the cross, which was then beside her son Ed's home. The original cross had a metal plate bearing the image of Jesus. The cross was taken down in 1952 due to road work being done. Ed Havorka had resurrected the cross in 1975 in the same spot it had stood since the late 1870s. The cross is 8 foot tall. Cheryl and Tim O'Brien now live on the family farm. Cheryl was a Havorka. Cheryl is quoted in the Tribune article saying, "The cross helps us to appreciate everything our grandparents and great-grandparents did for us in settling this land." Cheryl's husband, Tim, proposed to Cheryl right in front of that cross. What a legacy that cross has for both of our families. The St. Mary's Catholic Church of Linwood was built in 1901. Leo Uranic told us that his family donated the cottonwood trees used to build St. Mary's Church. The priests of Abie tended to the Catholic flock of Linwood and served at St. Mary's. Prior to the church being built, they preached masses in people's homes, but also some Linwood Catholics would have gone to church in Abie. John Kopetsky, who lived in Linwood until 1963, says his uncle John Kopetsky built the altar for St. Mary's in Linwood, which is now an altar in the church in Abie. 1900 census showed a population of 317 for Linwood. 41 people were employed by or in business in the Linwood downtown, with 30 different occupations. Business owners' names were Joseph Cherney as a cigar maker, Frank Cherney doing the watch repair, E.P. Wesley as a shoemaker, J.C. Straska as a school principal, A.A. Hayek running a hardware store, Frank Bartos as a merchant, M.R. Brazina as a painter, William Blair as a postmaster, and Jacob Vittenbos as a tailor, plus many, many more. This is a beautiful photograph of the interior of a blacksmith shop in Linwood. John Molina believes this is the blacksmith shop that was lost to a fire. This is a photo of the Vince Sedlichky farm near Linwood, and we can see that even in 1913, harvest meant harnessing horses and plenty of hard work. It took many men to do this work, so farmers were always happy if they had many sons. I'm not too sure who the men in this photo are, but this is about the same time that Anton Bartzel wrote about his new thresher and the various farmers in the area that he hired out to. I'm sure you've attended events in the Oak Ballroom in Schuyler. Many of the natural timbers and beams were cut from the native oak trees of the Linwood area. Almost 100 years ago is when the Bartzel family began their logging business. There's a lot of history of that portable operation moving throughout the area and on the site of the John Bartzel farm located just south of County Road V and 44, where this picture was taken. Between logging and corn shelling, the Bartzels kept very busy. In fact, I believe you would all be very interested in a presentation from Larry covering the history of their family and business. I also want to thank Larry for the variety of memorabilia, including the two-man saw. If you've all seen it next to the wall on the floor, in the 40s or 50s, that service was available for $4 an hour. Ludwig J. Peltz and his transportation of the early years. In 1920, the census showed the first decline in population in Linwood. It went from 329 in 1910 to 297 in 1920. Fred Thomas was the official enumerator, which was for the census taker. He was also the postmaster at that time. The Chicago and Northwestern Roundhouse at Linwood had 2 locomotives that were in it that were destroyed by a fire on Wednesday night, November 24th, 1926, at 10 o'clock. The loss is estimated between $50,000 to $75,000. A loss of this type today would be valued at $1.25 million. The origin of the fire is still quite a mystery, as the interior of the roundhouse was cemented and bricked. Also, it was mysterious that the fire was so early in the night. This information was published in the news article in the Butler County Press. The University of Nebraska's archaeology department did several digs in the Linwood and Abie area back in the 30s and then again in the 50s. This is why we have knowledge of the grand tribe of the Pawnee who lived in this area. In the early 1900s, there were general stores, hardware stores, everything a people in a small town would need. The meat market in this photo behind the sandbar on the north side of the alley at the east end of the block, and it was operated by Sophie Peltz Schluter in the 1930s. Gary Sorensen recalled that the meat market was eventually taken over by Fred Thomas and turned into a grocery store. Gary said that he remembers the first time he went into the store, he was maybe 5 years old, and it was around 1950. He had a note from his mom and enough money to buy Pall Malls and a package of bologna and enough left over for a couple suckers. Ball teams were a source of entertainment for all the small towns back in the 1900s. Linwood had a strong team. Alfred Tkachuk wrote that they were unbeatable and held their games west of town. Among the memorabilia on the back table, there's a baseball scorebook with many old names in it. During the 1980s, the ball field was kept busy with the local sandbar team and an occasional traveling tournament of the county fire departments. The 40s and 50s saw the end of the Chicago and Northwestern line coming through Linwood. The town fought to keep it, but eventually the War Production Board requisitioned the rails and steel scrap. This hit Linwood hard. Automobiles had already replaced the need for the train passenger traffic, but the jobs lost when the rail lines left would decrease the income of many people. Business activities seriously decreased, and by 1950, Linwood's population was only at 168. 1958 would see the last graduating class of Linwood School. By the 1960s, the railroad engine house was sold to a farmer who used it as a machine shed. Eventually, it was covered by tin as it remains today. John Kopesky shared his memories. John went to Linwood on weekends as a child to visit his grandparents, the Comas. They'd sit in the sunroom in rocking chairs and visit and play cards while John's parents went out, perhaps to dance at the hall. John remembers the ZCBJ Hall as where the community gathered to watch plays put on by the Czech people of the town. John also remembered going to either Pellon's Tavern or the Sandbar in Linwood with his father. John recalled the old men at the Sandbar playing thorax, and they hardly spoke any English unless a Yankee came into the bar. Cheryl O'Brien remembers drinking Nesbitt soda she bought for a nickel from the Sandbar. Then her and her friend would sit on the curb by the bar and watch the free outdoor movies across the street on summer nights. The movies were projected onto a big wooden screen attached to posts. On May 3rd, 1960, the village board voted to hire Burish Brothers to show a total of 11 movies for $18. They would come to town and show a movie. Their car had speakers on the roof. They went all around to all the small towns, and each town would have their free show on a different night. He also had a popcorn maker and sold popcorn. The community often used these events to sell burgers to raise money for local projects. Sharon Kervanek reminisced about how much she missed the little St. Mary's Catholic Church and was sad her wedding missed being held there by 1 year. This is a photo of the young women crowning Mary, which was a May ritual at St. Mary's Church in Linwood. This is an interesting photo of an event in the ZCBJ Hall in October of 1946. It's of a mock wedding held for John P. and Mary Nimitz Kuchera, taken by the Boston studio of David City. Members of the community dressed as a wedding entourage and staged a mock ceremony. Players had specific roles such as bride, groom, minister, ring bearer, and bridesmaid, and there was usually a script with speaking parts. This drama involves both men and women actors who cross-dress, and they enjoyed a bit of horseplay. Often, the bride was a very large man, while the groom was a petite woman. Outrageous costumes, masks, and props usually added to the nature of the performances. This photo was provided by Cheryl O'Brien. These photos are from the 8th grade play in May 11th, 1951 in the Linwood High School Assembly Room. The old school, now long closed, had stairs to the girls' side of the building and boys' side of the building. Desks were in front of the auditorium stage. A person of note from Linwood is Francis Rudolph Schonka, who was born in 1906 in Linwood. He went on to become a physicist and inventor, creating the Schonka ionization chamber, Schonka plastics, and Schonka electrometer. He was respected for his research in radiation. He was also a professor of physics at different colleges in Illinois as well as in China. He authored many academic publications. It is thought he may have played a role in the Manhattan Project. And now it's time to talk about the story of the disaster that hit Linwood, the worst flood of the 20th century in Butler County. It was the evening of June 24th, 1963, when the rain began to fall, and it fell through the night and into the morning, saturating the ground until it could hold no more, and filling Skull Creek to the point of overflowing. From the creek, a wall of water rushed toward Linwood, knocking it off its foundations, leaving mud and debris, and literally drowning the old town, suffocating the spirit and energy of that generation of its people. The people responded that they had flooding before, and it didn't amount to much. Then the water surged into town, rolling outhouses, cars, and sheds, and moving buildings off their foundations. According to the Fremont Guide and Tribune, Mrs. Tony Pellon, the proprietor of Pellon's Grocery, said nobody really believed it was going to flood. She added that not until rural mail carrier Willard Peters blew the fire whistle did anybody show any concern. Linwood had a population of 173 at the time of the flood. More than 10 inches of rain fell and Skull Creek flooded. The west side of Linwood was hit the hardest. Joe Gruntrud kicked out a window and climbed on the porch, then up onto the roof of the house. The house floated 3 blocks before it stopped by a grove of trees and the railroad. He waited 5 hours to be rescued. The Leo Marish home moved 50 feet. Jim Palla's home had water filling the foundation after his home moved 100 feet northeast across the street where it bumped into Jim Cherokee house. Cherokee said his home was a total loss. The impact knocked the porch off the house and buckled the living room floor. He lost the refrigerator he had just purchased the week before. Teresa Jacob remembered going to a farm to help save pigs and piglets that would have drowned. They put them in a truck and took them to higher ground. She also recalled how when the people came in to broom the water out of the businesses, the water from the bars made the whole town smell like whiskey. Estimates of water depth ranged to 10 feet. In Linwood, out of 72 homes, all but 7 were damaged. Many people moved away. Steadily, the businesses in Linwood were either forced to close or moved to another community. The St. Mary's Catholic Church of Linwood closed 5 years later in 1969. The church bell from St. Mary's of Linwood is now hanging in the bell display of Columbus in Pawnee Park. The bell from the Linwood Congregational Church is also part of this monument. Nowhere Special Steakhouse and Saloon draws customers from far away as well as the people from Smoky Owl Lake. Students of Linwood go to Schuyler, North Bend, or David City to school. Linwood has a 5-member board of trustees, and the village employs a village clerk and a maintenance man. District 10 Schoolhouse near Linwood is owned by Mary Soul, and she has turned the old school into a neat place to have a cold refreshment, listen to music. District 10 is listed as a Nebraska historical building. Linwood has a little park where children of the town can play. The parkland was donated by Bud Tkachik, and there is a monument there that holds the old firehouse bell. There's a little library in front of the post office. Dave Mock purchased and built and put up the post office building back in 1992. In the 1980s, the people of Linwood were doing their best to make their community feel like a family. They put out a monthly newsletter called Town and Country Notes, which was written and published by members of the Linwood Community Club. The series began in May of 1984. This letter included events and happenings of the community. It came out on the 20th day of each month. The first copy talked about the Linwood Fire Department's annual Vegas night at the Hall, the annual school picnic for District 2, the community club, the 4th of July picnic, CPR classes at the fire station, and all other Linwood news. There was the swap section. One comical in search of was from Steve Whitmerhouse. Was looking for a wife who was willing to cook, clean, and provide warmth, but she had to have her own tractor. And the presentation would not be complete without the fire department. Linwood Fire Company was organized in 1894. Many of the department records were destroyed in fire and the flood, but with that, much has been found to state that they started with a hand pumper and buckets to fight fires. Linwood is unique in that we have groundwater cisterns to supply water for the fire protection instead of fire hydrants. We've come a long way with the forming of the Linwood Rural Fire Protection District in 1957. Pictured here are Philip Kriege, Vern Arps, Leonard Bilitsky, Adolf Eger, Ladi Virka, and possibly Leonard Mocklund, but we're really not sure, along with Fire Chief Ernie Eger. The first fire station for the Linwood Rural Fire Protection District was built in 1958, and the current fire station was built in 1982. Linwood purchased their first motorized fire truck from Schuyler in 1946. It was a 1928 Grams Brothers chemical truck that holds an interesting history. The truck was damaged in the 1963 flood and traded to Albongers of David City for what was needed to repair the pumper. Later it was sold to a gentleman in Colorado and then to a gentleman that served as the fire chief in Alliance, Nebraska. When he retired, Joel and Dave had become friends, and one night he called to say the truck was for sale. Yes, a road trip to Texas was made to haul back this precious piece of history. It happened to be the same weekend the Linwood Volunteer Fire Department members were meeting for their annual appreciation dinner. I wish I could have captured the look on several members' faces when Joel drove up to the dinner in this truck. I can still recall Bob Uronic asking Ernie Eger if we put out the fire at Bundes with this truck, and Ernie's response was, "You know, we didn't put out a lot of fires with this truck." The Linwood Volunteer Fire Department will always cherish the lessons taught by Ernie Eger. The years he served as fire chief, the dedication he had to the department, the members, and the community. We were honored to serve with him, and I'm sure may have caused him a few gray hairs, but he will forever be a legend to everyone that served with him during his 61 years of service. Also pictured here are longtime members Joe Molina and Ed Duda. What's been great about all of this is the memories that have come back to everyone. Janice Eger remembered a celebration in town, the 35th anniversary of the KD branch of the Catholic Church. There were many events advertised, such as the Mickey Mouse Parade, the Cheeksboro Band, a baseball tournament, a fried chicken dinner, low mass, high mass, a clown band, a carnival, and an acrobatic show put on by Darlene Minchik-Makalan. Janice also remembered the beauty shop near the ZCBJ Hall. Of course, everything in Linwood is pretty much near everything. Janice also told of the businessman named Emil Kretschmann who had a trucking business hauling cattle to Omaha for people of the area. Once a year, Emil would host a free dance at the hall to thank his customers. People of the area really looked forward to that dance. There's been much discussion about where businesses were. There was Kopetsky's barbershop and Balmer's garage, and of course the telephone office. We mustn't forget Emil Bunde's repair shop, which Ernie Eger ran until the flood. People talked about the barber shop that had a generator for the town at the back of the store. Dave Mock recalls that a building east of the bank had a grocery store run by Emil Cherney. Teresa Jacob remembered Emil coming out to her folks' farm to buy eggs for his store. Teresa also remembered going to Hobart's shack. The woman who ran it dressed like a gypsy. She had a cute little ice cream chairs and tables, and Teresa's family went there after the free shows. Linwood's Main Street is now sparse, but there was a time when businesses lined both sides of the main street as well as the connecting streets. This town had a lot going on in the late 1800s and early 1900s and played a very important role in the beginnings of Butler County, which is why we're proud to tell you about the history of Linwood. The true leaders of this small town have always known that success is happiness, safety, family, and community, and it really was a doggone nice town. So here's to the past and the future success of the towns of the county, and here's to the next 150 years of Butler County. And we would like to thank you so much for sitting through our presentation. Thank you so much. And do we have any questions or anyone that wants to add anything? Come on up, Larry.
No, I'll just do it from here. About 10 or 15 years ago, I was talking to Stanley Shovlick, and he knew that I had some old Packards. And he
Can
wanted-
you hear him? All right, Larry.
Yeah, good job.
I just thought you might be interested in the fact that Stanley Shovlick loved to take pictures, and he asked me to bring one of my antique cars over, and he took a bunch of pictures, and as we were standing by the house where he was born, he told me that he was watching when he was about 10 years old, he was watching the train stopped at Rogers loading passengers. And I says to him, how many trees do you suppose was between you and Rogers? Because, you know, it's almost a mile to the river, and from there it's another mile to the next town. And he said, 10 or 15. The other thing that I thought you might be interested in is the cemetery that you're talking about that's west of town. That, was that, who owned that ground just north there? Do you remember, Kurt? Kurt? That doesn't sound right. Anyway, what I was wanting to tell you was that we were asked to take the trees off north of the cemetery about 40 years ago. And I'm walking down in there, and I says to whoever owned it, I said, why was this built this way? This is man-made. And they said that during the 30s, they were going to have a waterway that went from Bellwood all the way to Fremont, because there was a large sawmill over there. And if you go out there north of the cemetery, you can see that waterway. It still lays there. It's all overgrown with trees, but it's just an interesting fact I thought you might like to know.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments or stories to share? Okay. Can I have the three of you come up here? So the Butler County Historical Society has done this for every presenter, and we're just giving you a certificate of appreciation. We'd give you more if we could, but you know, what you get to do is be the members of the Butler County Historical Society for a few years.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, thank you. This is it, folks. This is the last one. It's been a long year and a lot of fun, and we've enjoyed it so much. Every presenter has just been outstanding. These small towns, wow, they have history, and it's important to our county, what those histories meant to the growth of this county. So thank you to the Cherney family for all you've done. Is there anybody here who has come to all 12 of the programs? And if so, please stand. Let's give them a round of applause. We're just giving him a little bit. Oh no, how will I know that you were standing? Who else was standing? You were, okay. Thank you. Thank you for coming all the time. It meant a lot to us that you were here. Okay. I only knew that Bob was because he was our guinea pig, so he was here from the beginning. So, also, if you were a presenter for these 12 programs, would you please stand up at this time? All the presenters, please. I see Mark, Barb, Cherney, Sharon, Jim, Diane, Bob, Greg's back there, Barb, Jeannie. Hey, Carol, how do you say that word?
CBJ.
That darn ZCBJ Hall. How do you say it? Well, thank you.
That was close.
You were my guy. I knew you were going to be able to do it for me. So, thank you. I just can't thank you enough. The presenters work so hard. They practice, practice, practice. I don't know how many hours they would have put into these presentations, but we owe them a debt of gratitude because they represented their town like professionals, and I could not be more proud of them all. So the Towns of the County series is done, but not programs about history. We're going to continue to have programs next year. A lot of people came up to us and said, don't stop, keep doing this. We're not gonna do 12 again, because that just about killed us. We're gonna do one every quarter. And we've already got 3 of them planned. The first one will be in March, and it's gonna be Doc Frank Eckstein, and he's gonna talk about Loma. And then we have one in June, and it's gonna be Steve Schmid, and he's gonna talk about the lost towns of Butler County. And then one that I'm awfully excited about is Carm Fiala in September is going to talk about country schools. So anybody who went to a country school is gonna love that one. And we really don't know yet what December is gonna be. If you have ideas, share them with us. If you have somebody you know that would be a good presenter, that's important because programs are only given if we have a presenter. So let us know if you've got a great idea and you want to have a program that would be about Butler County history. So as always, we want to thank the Butler County Area Foundation because they gave us a partial grant. We want to thank the Nebraska Historical Society Foundation who gave us a full grant, and to all of you who donated, because that made up the rest of the numbers that helped us pay for these programs over the course of the year. We are working on a book. We're going to have a book published next year. It will be a record of all of these programs. They're all available always for you to view on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel, we upload them, but we thought it'd be nice to put them in print and to have all the pictures in the book too. So that'll be available for sale at every one of the programs next year, as well as over the summer at the Depot Museum. And we have found out that we've got funding from the Butler County Area Foundation, and they are our partner next year, along with hopefully the library and of course the Butler County Historical Society. And now I want to say something about the library. We absolutely could not have done these programs without the help of the Hrushka Memorial Library and Kay Schmidt at the helm. Every single time we came here, Kay was here and so was Cheryl. They did so much to make these happen, and so many of you I know are here because you're loyal library program attendees, so we thank them so much. And we thank you. Yes, big round of applause. And we thank you, because really, we can stand up here and talk all day, but if there's nobody in the seats, it's not good programming, so thank you. And now, we're gonna close out this year with some music. We have the Darrow sisters, who sang at the Garrison program, and they sang at the David City program, and they actually wrote a song for this program, so come on up, girls.
Thank you.
We also wanted to remember to thank Jackie for making the collages.
We love small towns. This is our Happy Holidays Christmas version. Let's take a drive up to Linwood and look at Christmas lights. The holidays are all around. We've got Abie and Bruno and Loma in our side. We love small towns. Lots of sparkle in Octavia and Dwight. Brainard and Bellwood are shining so bright. And rising city lampposts do gleam so nice. We love small towns. Now we're in Garrison and we're hoping the bar is open and we'll get some drummies there. Then we'll
turn west and we'll travel over gravel. In surprise we'll have good cheer. Lots of good cheer. Now we'll drive down to Ulysses 'cause it's all aglow. But here in Butler County it's starting to snow. Let's head back to David and we'll drive real slow. Light snow coming down, Christmas lights all around. We love small towns.
Which one?
Oh, there's no place like home for the holidays. So we'll mention all our towns in one more song. We're so blessed to be living in a friendly place. And we're proud that Butler County is our home. We learned about Abie and Brainard, Bellwood, Bruno, all were fine. Rising City and Octavia were cool. Oh, pretty cool. Dwight and Garrison were included. Linwood, Loma, they were too. David City and Ulysses and surprise, they were with us. Yes. Oh, there's no place like home for the holidays. So we mentioned all our towns in this last song. One last song. We're so blessed to be living in a friendly place. And we're proud that Butler County is our home. Yes, we're proud that Butler County is our home. Wish every small town in Butler County Merry Christmas from our hometown of Garrison. So we'd like to sing, what are we going to sing? Wish you Merry Christmas. Wish you a Merry Christmas. And sing along if you care to. We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Good tidings to you wherever you are. Good tidings for Christmas and a Happy New Year. We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
That was excellent.
Everybody, go home. Be safe. Have a good holiday. Get one of these on your way out. Go home.